हेलो एंड गुड इवनिंग टू ऑल ऑफ़ यू। कैसे हैं आप लोग? आई होप आप लोग बहुत अच्छे होंगे और अपनी ट्रेडिंग जर्नी बहुत अच्छी तरीके से एंजॉय कर रहे होंगे। आपके साथ फिर से जुड़ चुके हैं मीकली के न्यू लाइव सेशन में। सब लोग जल्दी जल्दी जुड़ जाइए। इट्स न्यूज़ टाइम। आप जैसे फॉरेक्स फैक्ट्री पर जा कर के देखोगे तो आपको एक बड़ा ही अच्छा चीज़ दिखेगा कि 11:30 में फेडरल फंड रेट का न्यूज़ है। तो यह काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूज़ होता है। 27 सेकेंड बाकी है। सब लोग बी रेडी गाइज, सब लोग एक्टिव रहेंगे अच्छे ट्रेड के लिए। बी रेडी गाइज। चलिए लेट्स गो। 4 सेकेंड बाकी है, देखना है। चलिए रेट कट नहीं हुआ है, बहुत अच्छी बात है। जैसा फॉरकास्ट था वैसा ही आया है न्यूज़, घबराने की बात नहीं है। अच्छा है। उसके बाद FOMC इकोनॉमिक प्रोजेक्शन, उसके बाद स्टेटमेंट है और 12 बजे भी एक न्यूज़ है। 12 बजे भी एक प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस है, पॉवेल का स्पीच है कि नहीं? तो चलिए देखते हैं क्या होता है। कुछ अच्छे ट्रेड के लिए हम लोग वेट करेंगे। जैसा कि आज ऑलरेडी बहुत अच्छी मूवमेंट हुई थी डे में। दिन का मूवमेंट आप देख सकते हैं, बहुत अच्छा फॉल किया था। ऑलमोस्ट 180 पॉइंट के आसपास का फॉल आया था। तो न्यूज़ के समय देखते हैं क्या कुछ करता है मार्केट। ये न्यूज़ कैंडल है, थोड़ा सा रुकेंगे हम लोग। 87 to 98 मार्केट गई है। चलिए अगेन रिजेक्ट हो रही है। We should have to wait some time, then we will trade in better manner. चलिए लेट्स सी। ओके, यहाँ एक न्यूज़, यहाँ एक हम लोग ट्रेड देख सकते हैं। सेल साइड को के तरफ हम लोग एक ट्रेड देखेंगे। करेंट मार्केट प्राइस पर हम लोग सेल को लेकर के इंटरेस्टेड हैं। अगर हम लोग सेल करें तो काफ़ी अच्छे टारगेट पॉसिबल होंगे मिलना इसमें। हाई का हम लोग स्टॉप लॉस लगा लेंगे। ऑलमोस्ट 67 पिप्स का स्टॉप लॉस है। बाई साइड में मार्केट नहीं गई है, देन इट्स टाइम टू गो इन द डायरेक्शन ऑफ सेल साइड। थोड़ा मूव कर देगी, उसके बाद हम लोग SL को CTC डाल देंगे और ये एग्जीक्यूशन फास्ट ही रखेंगे तो ज़्यादा बेटर होगा। ओके, आप लोग स्टॉप लॉस को कॉस्ट पर डाल दोगे। इट्स ऑलरेडी 30 पिप्स मूव। पुट द स्टॉप लॉस एट द एंट्री पॉइंट। स्टॉप लॉस को कॉस्ट पर डाल देंगे। न्यूज़ टाइम है, मार्केट काफ़ी फास्ट मूव करेगी। सो बी रेडी गाइज। टारगेट तो इसमें काफ़ी बड़े होंगे, लेकिन यू कैन बुक 50% ऑफ योर क्वांटिटी। 50% क्वांटिटी आप यहाँ पर बुक कर सकते हैं। ऑलरेडी अपने एंट्री से 80 पिप्स डाउन है। इट्स 80 पिप्स डाउन, ऑलमोस्ट 90 पिप्स डाउन गाइस। बुक सम पार्शियल क्वांटिटी। पार्शियल हम लोग इसमें बुक करेंगे एंड रेस्ट क्वांटिटी आर प्लेसिंग TTC. It's first trade, न्यूज टाइम फर्स्ट ट्रेड. ओके लेट्स सी क्या करता है. देखिए मार्केट का सिंपल सा व्यू था. मार्केट न्यूज़ कैंडल जो बनाया था 1 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम पर वो बाइंग को लेकर के था, लेकिन बाइंग कंटिन्यू हुआ नहीं, रिजेक्ट कर गई, पूरी की पूरी रिजेक्ट कर गई. तो EMA के नीचे जैसे ही मार्केट क्लोजिंग दिया रेड कैंडल, हमने थोड़ा सा रिजेक्शन पर सेल करा है, इस पॉइंट के आसपास सेल करा है. और नेक्स्ट कैंडल में 80 पिप्स मोर देन 90 पिप्स का फॉल आपको दिखा है. फिर हमने क्या किया है, 50% क्वांटिटी बुक किया है. 50% क्वांटिटी इज CTC एंड वी आर वेटिंग फॉर बिग टारगेट. 50% क्वांटिटी को हम लोग नीचे बुक करेंगे 60 के अबाउट. लेट्स सी व्हाट इज गोइंग ऑन, क्या होता है हम लोग देखेंगे. ओके कम गाइज, लेट्स सी व्हाट इज हैपनिंग. थोड़ा सा वेट करेंगे, देखते हैं क्या हो रहा है. चलिए, इट्स मोर देन 110 पिप्स. आपका नशा सरफरोश है, आपके कसस मदहोश है. क्या कहूँ तुमसे जान जान, क्यों खोया होश में. Okay, come guys, see, it's more than 110 pips and market is going डाउन अगेन। देखा मैंने होता है क्या सरफरोश है। ओके गाइज, थोड़ा सा मार्केट टाइम पास कर रहा है इस जोन पर। ऑलमोस्ट हम लोग को 1:1 से बड़ा ट्रेड मिला है। 65 पिप्स का इसमें अपना एसएल था। आप यहाँ देखें, टॉप का हमने एसएल लगाया था। 68 पिप्स का एसएल था और इसमें आपको मिला है 116 पिप्स। मोर देन 1:1 ट्रेड, 1:1.5 से ज़्यादा का मिला है। 50% क्वांटिटी हम लोगों ने बॉटम पर बुक किया है एंड 50% क्वांटिटी इज सीटीसी। बिकॉज न्यूज़ टाइम है, बहुत बड़े बड़े स्पाइक इसमें आते रहते हैं, तो स्पाइक में अपना एसएल नहीं जाना चाहिए या सीटीसी नहीं जाना चाहिए। दैट्स वाई वी बुक्ड 50% क्वांटिटी एंड मोर क्वांटिटी इज रिस्क फ्री। Market is very volatile now. You can see up and down spikes within a second. आपका नशा। ओके, अप साइड मूव आई है। वी शुड हैव टू वेट फॉर सम टाइम। देखते हैं क्या होता है। थोड़ा लंबे टाइम फ्रेम पर हम लोग एनालिसिस करेंगे, देखेंगे मार्केट में क्या मोमेंटम बन सकती है। आज का फॉल अगर आप लोग देखें 15 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम पर और फेयर वैल्यू फिबोनाची रिट्रेसमेंट का अगर आप यूज करें तो जैसा कि आज हम लोगों ने आफ्टरनून में यहाँ से जस्ट टॉप से हम लोगों ने एक सेल दिया था और आप देख सकते हैं वन साइडेड ऑलमोस्ट 180 पॉइंट का फॉल आया था। सेम पॉइंट स्विंग हाई एंड स्विंग लो के बीच अगर आप फिबोनाची का यूज करोगे, अगर आप फिबोनाची यहाँ लगाते हो तो आपको बड़ा ही मज़ेदार पैटर्न देखने को मिलेगा। यहाँ पर आपको कुछ गोल्डन जोन मिलेंगे, 78% का है ये। फिर अपने पास यह एक जोन है 61% का, फिर ये एक है 50% का, फिर ये है एक 38% का। मार्केट 38% तक नहीं पहुंच पाई है, मतलब बाइंग बहुत ज़्यादा वीक है, बहुत ज़्यादा वीक है, समझे, बाइंग काफ़ी वीक है। तो हम लोग सेल साइड को लेकर के ही एग्रेसिव है अभी भी फ़िलहाल। और मार्केट अगर फॉल करती है, जैसा कि हम लोगों ने एक ट्रेड लिया है, मार्केट अगर फॉल करती है तो आपको पूरा नीचे तक क्रैश देखने को मिलेगा। आप इसमें यहाँ तक भी टारगेट देख सकते हो, ये भी मूव कर जाएगा। देखते हैं हालांकि क्या होता है। फ़िलहाल मार्केट थोड़ा सा फंसा हुआ है, थोड़ा सा 15 मिनट टाइम 1 आवर टाइम फ्रेम ईएमए के नीचे, 4 आवर टाइम फ्रेम ईएमए के काफ़ी नीचे है। हो सकता है कि इस लेवल तक चला जाए, 60% तक कल परसों आपको देखने को मिलेगा। 1 आवर टाइम फ्रेम पर नीचे ही है, 30 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम पर रिजेक्शन ले रहा है, वेरी गुड। 15 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम पर ईएमए के नीचे आने की कोशिश कर रही है। 5 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम ऑलरेडी ईएमए के नीचे है। देन यू कैन सी इट्स ऑलमोस्ट 120 पिप्स, 130 पिप्स मूव। आपका कस नशा क्यों सरफरोश है, क्या कहूँ तुमसे क्यों खोया होश है। जाना मैंने जाना। ओ कुकू, हेलो कुकू, कम टू मी। ओके गाइज, चले जाओ कुकू। ओके, लेट्स सी क्या होता है। मार्केट टारगेट देती है या सीटीसी ले जाती है। इसमें अपना स्टॉप लॉस नहीं जाने वाला। बिटकॉइन क्या कर रहा है जरा समझते हैं। ओ माय गॉड, यहाँ हम लोगों ने बाई करा था, लेकिन बैड लक ये था कि अपना एसएल ले करके यहाँ पर आप देख सकते हैं हम लोगों ने 265 पॉइंट एसएल के साथ, काफ़ी लोगों का स्टॉप लॉस इसमें छोटा था क्योंकि कुछ लोग यहाँ पर बाई किए थे। यहाँ पर हम लोग का स्टॉप लॉस लेकर के मार्केट वन साइडेड रैली करी है, ऑलमोस्ट टारगेट तक मार्केट गई है कि नहीं? कोई नहीं, इसमें 265 पॉइंट का स्टॉप लॉस था अपना, और इसमें ऑलरेडी हम लोग 130 पिप्स का 130 पिप्स इसमें हम लोगों ने बुक कर रखा है। चलिए देखते हैं क्या करता है। अभी भी ट्रेड अपना पॉजिटिव में रन कर रहा है। जब से हम लोगों ने इसमें एंट्री किया है तब से मार्केट एंट्री के समय से ही थोड़े देर बाद से अपना ट्रेड ग्रीन में रन कर रहा है। इट्स ऑलमोस्ट 20 मिनट टाइम, 20 मिनट पहले हम लोगों ने इसमें एंट्री बनाया था। एक डोजी कैंडल बनाया, उसके बाद सेलिंग कैंडल, उसके बाद ग्रीन, उसके बाद फिर से सेलिंग कैंडल, फिर से ग्रीन। तो रेड ग्रीन टाइप की यहाँ पर चीज़ें हो रही हैं। थोड़ा सा हम लोग यहाँ पर अवेयर रहेंगे। मार्केट अगर मूव करती है अपने डायरेक्शन में तो बहुत अच्छी मूव आ जाएगी। आज थोड़ा सा स्लो इस वजह से है कि दिन में मार्केट बहुत बड़ी रैली कर चुकी है। हम लोग थोड़ा सा वेट करेंगे, देखते हैं क्या होता है, कहाँ तक मार्केट फॉल करती है। मिनिमम इसमें 65 तक मूव तो मिनिमम आना चाहिए एज एक्सपेक्टेड। ये जो आप जोन देख रहे हो, मिनिमम इस जोन तक तो मार्केट को गिरना ज़रूरी है। ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट डिमांड जोन है। बदमाशी नहीं। ओके गाइज, ऑलमोस्ट 150 पिप्स डन। 150 पिप्स तक का मूव हो चुका है। 1:2 हो गया है इसमें। 165 पिप्स का एसएल था इसमें और 150 पिप्स का मूवमेंट वी हैव सीन नाउ। 50% क्वांटिटी बुकड है एंड 50% क्वांटिटी इज रिस्क फ्री। चलो ऐसे बैठो। ओके गाइज, मूवमेंट काफ़ी स्लो हो गई है। वेरी स्लो मूवमेंट है मार्केट में। 1 मिनट टाइम फ्रेम पर अगर आप देखें तो एक पैरेलल चैनल टाइप का बना लिया है मार्केट और उसी में मूव कर रहा है। यू कैन सी दिस इज मूवमेंट इन पैरेलल चैनल। कैसा है? इस कैंडल पर बीटीसी में हम लोगों ने एंट्री बनाया था और नेक्स्ट कैंडल में ही रिवर्स हो गया, एसएल गया एंड अपसाइड रैली। कोई नहीं, ये जो जोन था इसमें हम लोगों को एंट्री करना चाहिए। दिस वाज बैड ट्रेड। चलिए, अभी भी गोल्ड अपना ग्रीन जोन में रन कर रहा है, देखते हैं कब तक रेंज बाउंडेड रहता है। FOMC इकोनॉमिक प्रोजेक्शन 1201 part of Iran South parts our FOMC summary project.
At the end of the year, thereafter. Inflation is significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the consumer price index data indicate that total prices rose 2.8% over the 12 months ending in February, and that excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 3.0%. These elevated largely reflect inflation in the sector, which has been boosted by the effects of tariffs. Term measures of inflation expectations in recent weeks likely reflecting the substantial supply disruptions in the Middle East. Most measures of expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal. The median projection in the S&P for total PCE inflation this year is 2.7% and 2.2% next year, a bit higher than projected in December. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to make a target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5% to 3/4%. From last September to December, our policy rate 3/4 percentage point, bringing it to a range of plausible estimates of neutral. This normalization of our policy stance should continue to stabilize the labor market while allowing inflation to resist a downward trend toward 2%. But events in the Middle East economy are uncertain. In the near term, higher energy prices will push up overall inflation. Too soon to know the scope and of the potential effects of the risks to both sides of our mandate. Position to determine the extent of additional adjustments, policy rate based on the incoming, evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. expects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 3.4% at the end of this year, 0.1% at the end of next year, unchanged from December. As is always the case, these individual funds are subject to uncertainty, and they are not committee for decision. The policy is a preset course, and our decisions on a basis. To conclude, the Fed has been assigned two goals: policy, employment, stable prices.
चलिए इस ट्रेड में हम लोग को 200 पिप्स का मूवमेंट मिल चुका है. नाउ वी हैव टू वेट एंड वॉच फॉर नेक्स्ट बिग टारगेट. चलिए यहाँ BTC भी फॉल कर रही है. BTC को भी BTC बहुत अच्छा फॉल कर रही है गाइस. यू कैन सी दिस मूवमेंट.
There's been some debate about whether the Fed should look through the inflation that will come from higher oil prices stemming from the Middle East conflict. Is that the right approach at this juncture? And to what extent does the fact that inflation has been above target for roughly 5 years now influence?
So, let me say, well aware of the performance of inflation over the years, and a series of shocks have interrupted progress that we've made. And that happened most recently with tariffs, and then there will be some effects on inflation going forward. The thing that's really important that we see this year is progress on inflation through a reduction in goods inflation as one-time effects on prices of tariffs go through the system, go through the economy. That's the main thing we're looking for going into this exercise. And we need to be seeing that to sort of understand that we actually are making this, because on net we didn't make this. If you look at total inflation, total core inflation, it's about 3%, and some big chunk of that, between 3/4, is actually tariffs. So we're looking on that. The question of what we look through energy inflation doesn't really arise until we kind of check that box. Of course, is kind of standard that you look through energy shocks, but that's always been dependent on inflation expectations remaining anchored. And I think now it's also dependent on what you mentioned, just that broader concept of 5 years now of inflation above target. We have to keep all those things in mind, and the question of looking through when it does arise will be one to approach not lightly, but things that you mentioned.
And just on the S&P, can you help sense if there is still a bias to cut officials this year, despite the upward revision to headline and core inflation and the essentially unchanged forecast for growth and unemployment? I'm just curious, kind of what's the genesis behind it? What's the need for the cut?
Yeah, so 19 individual submission, but some immediate, but there was actually some toward a meaningful amount of movement toward fewer cuts by people. So 4 or 5 people from 2 to 1, let's say, 2 cuts to 1 cut. And the person has individual stories behind what they want to do. Essentially, it is that that we will be making progress on inflation. Not as much as we had hoped, but some progress on inflation. It should come as we start to see in the middle of the year progress on tariffs. Going through once and tariff inflation coming down. And the rate forecast is on the performance of the economy. So if we don't see that progress, then you won't see the rate cut.
Is the higher inflation penciled in 2026?
So that's going to be part of it. But, so the shot for sure shows up here. Some of that core is, but no, it's also just the feeling that we haven't seen the progress that we had on tariffs and on the rest of it. So for whatever people did right up there, tariffs we see. It's just a question of how the economy takes some time.
And is the lack of change in subs, again, just concern that there is a potential growth coming? Gas, diverting spending.
I didn't get the second part of your question.
There's going to be potentially diverting money to gasoline. Parts of the economy could be a distribution of spending and consumption effects as well. So I'm wondering, is the rate forecast not changing because you sure you're
It's that the economic effect could be bigger than smaller than smaller. Don't. So something that seems to make sense of that's to your point. Period. Our gas price is going to weigh on consumption, weigh on disposable and consumption, but it's something lower than expected pass through. So people write down, it's one of those SEP number of people mentioned. If we were to skip an SEP, this would be a good one because we just don't. I wouldn't say there's a conviction that it's going to go through. Just you got to write the thing down. This is something. So, and we don't debate. How do you do to debate what the length or size of these effects would be? We just have to visual statement, and also, what you've written down before will be reluctant to be too far away from that, just because it's so unclear what the direction from this particular end will be. The economy growth has been solid, and inflation, the overshoot is mainly from the goods and tariffs. The labor market is the unemployment rate, of course, has changed since September. Very, very low break-even rate apparently for new jobs with little growth in supply, but the economy is doing pretty well. It's just we don't know what the effects of this will be, and really does.
In the past, the staff has suggested that oil prices may have a hit to consumption, which Howard was talking about, but that's somewhat offset by increases to domestic production. What do you talk about that dynamic, especially to the extent that how much production is happening right now?
So the first thing is there is a good thinking. The long-standing thing, to put it that way, is that you look through energy shocks. But as I mentioned, that's condition expectations. So, sorry, your question was.
The staff is saying about, and has said in the past,
So there'll be
offsets, yeah.
So that's true. We have order of energy. So any effects on employment, economic, and spending would be offset to some extent by the fact that our oil companies will and do more drilling. If you ask oil companies about doing, they're going to want to see a rise in oil prices for the buildup for the war, and I want to believe that's going to be persistent for a fairly long time. So they're sitting there with oil to go over $70. Start drilling whatever. They're going to make a reasonable, careful judgment that we're going to have high oil prices. So you don't that happening. Some of that could happen over time if you see that, but so the oil shock will still be some downward pressure on spending and employment and pressure on inflation, of course.
Let me just follow up on Toby's question. How much do you worry that having looked through tariff inflation and tariff inflation running above target and looking through the oil price shock, undermine credibility of the commitment to the 3% target?
We have to do our analysis and think these things. Of course, that's on everyone's. You know, we're well aware of the history, but you don't overreact to that. You know, you want to make the best judgment based on facts. We're not. I don't think that color our decision making is appropriate. It's more that it's been fun. We had and now we have an energy of some size, and we don't know what that's going to be actually. Those things, it's a repeated set of theory that's the kind of thing that can cause trouble for inflation expectations. And we work about that, and we are very strongly to doing what it takes to keep inflation expectations anchored at 2%. It's important that we do that. Very important.
Tim Rowe, Wall Street Journal. You've described monetary policy as modestly restrictive. Unemployment rate is roughly stable. Inflation moving sideways in the high twos, with an ongoing overshooting services and non-housing services, not just goods, and the economy doing fairly well, as you outlined. What gives you that inflation returns to target over the next couple of years?
Okay. So I would say the rate is, you could characterize it as in the high end of neutral, or you could characterize it as perhaps mild restrictive, even mostly restrictive. No one knows for sure, but it's in that range where it's somewhere. That the big part of the disinflation for just the of tariffs are put into place. Of course, what they do is they raise prices to some extent. To the extent those prices the tariffs are paid by consumers in a basis, and we're waiting for that process. It takes 8, 9, 10, 11 months to go through the system. Waiting for the tariffs, which were put in place over the course of the middle part of later last year. We're waiting for that to go through the system so that goods and return closer to what's always been. I mean, for many years it was, and before tariffs came in, it was 0, and it's running at like 2% now. So, and so that's kind of goods inflation at 2%. So that's not coming from standard Phillips curve restrictive policy. It's coming from the one time. We also think it's important, though, to see either restrictive or close to that, but not too restrictive, because the downside risk in the labor market. Balancing these goals in a situation where the risks to the labor market are to the downside, call for lower rates, and risks to inflation to the upside should call for higher rates or not. So we're in a difficult situation. We feel like the framework to balance the risks, and we feel like where we are now is kind of on the border, the higher border of restrictive versus restrictive, and we feel like that's the right place to be.
Can I ask about core non-housing services, though? Because there are some people who think that it hasn't done very well at all over the past year. Wage growth is down. If the labor market has loosened, then why has non-housing services inflation slowed?
That's a good question. It's it's frustrating. Labor non-housing services they basically move sideways per year. They're at the same level that they will come down. But it's a bunch of missing crap. But at the same time, that is one of the things we should be seeing, because to your point, labor market is clearly a source of inflationary pressures, and that should really service. But we're not seeing progress. So we expect for next year is continued for this year is continued progress on housing services. Finally seeing that inflation come down because the one-time effects of tariffs are through, and then also to get some help from services. That's what we'd like to see. But it's it's a good point. See much last year.
Thanks, Chevelle. Everyone with Fox Business. So in December, we saw revised down to 17,000. January revised down. February posted a loss. Is that a greater risk than the inflation side? Is that down overall?
Yeah, say that December, so that we're 3.0%. That 4 percentage point. It's a concern. Some inflation. So I would say that it's up.
Federal Reserve Chairman.
That is what the law calls for. That's what included. That's what we're doing. The board into referring to the statement that on the question of whether I will then continue as governor after my term and after I have not made that decision yet. We'll make we're going to set the issues.
Intelligence from Financial Times. With the current situation, something the growth risk is the right balance. Agree with
In the situation. In some partners that see with on this see
that was when it does projections from the story, supply stories, and despite the question, is that the right take for different report was?
negative supply. I'm sure realize was whether it's an in fact total understanding that. What do you take a step back? Like the ability. Couldn't 6
experienced a series of supply shocks. COVID too. Do you think that is the world that makes central bank to take start taking as a more
practice the US a lot. Because it does immediately raise between the two. But with COVID, shock. So I don't know that the world history flashlights people have written.
framework. Whatever happened to that, and I have like 5 follow-ups.
We have sheer communication. So to deal with it, also we already made all we made. I wish look, I'm sure it will.
So in January, plus today, inflation expectation, decided policy warning.
See that off the table correctly character. What was that several indicated did happen. Second one.
That was just a follow-up. There are a lot of supply chain. How much concern do you have about it? Efficacy policy.
Worry about. Like everybody. See, was it a little bit good? Season. I wouldn't speculate. It's
confident Fed will get back to its 2% goal. But there are some players who share this survey. So, and that they take signal. Sticky. I wonder if there was a discussion at this meeting of what were the views of what is the state of inflation expectations, the risks of
on short term, we moved up quite a lot for a reason. But long-term expectations, always find one or some one that's ultimately right through the whole period, overwhelming majority of cases, you know, forecasters have all been pretty solid on longer term inflation expectations. So, in case we didn't as of the price.
How the discussion will make discussing the of slowdown in growth and time where inflation remains and see that member pencil there being there is of stagflation at this point.
So people actually right by 10th, and then I think just growing confidence. Right.
If the discussion is inflation.
As I mentioned, figures. And that's not right now. We actually want it really close to long, and we have inflation that's, you know, percentage point above that. So calling that stagflation, it's not. Yeah, I would stag for. It's very difficult what they faced. Reason I reserve stag for that.
Trump's very. Do you
I don't.
the impact households facing?
Character. It's actually going to be really done. We're going to see
Victoria, I just want to ask for purposes of the next meeting, work between now and your next meeting. If we have oil prices, you know, above the next meeting, is that going to change your wait and see stance? Like, what would you all to move, or is you want to hold pretty indefinite?
we'll have to wait and see. We're going to learn a lot because we're going to learn 6 weeks to the day till the next meeting, and we're going to see. It's going to be very looks in the and I really we talk about alternative scenario. It's just I wouldn't very uncertain. I and we
itself is going to evolve, or even if things remain as they are, the economy could still remain relatively durable in face of them?
The U.S. economy is just a whole bunch of change. Go back to 2003 when close to 100 economy called for. It was a really strong. So, it has, in the next
About our question, what makes you so tariff will be a one-time effect? I don't think we can use the Supreme Court tariff decision, and it's pretty that us know what the extent of the tariff shock will be as the administration needs to replace some of the tariffs that were overturned. So I suppose I'm curious, what would make you question this certainty that tariffs are going to be a one-time price effect?
Well, I would not at all use the word certain about my views on that. I'm not certain, I'm uncertain. Just, if you think about what it is, it's a one-time increase in the price of a good, right? And what inflation is, ongoing increases in prices this year, next year, the year after. That's what inflation is. It's one-time price increases, and there's it's a public on that. That's the difference. And tariffs should be people expecting still more the next year and still more tariffs the next year. They should be the same thing. Traditional energy price spike. Traditionally, prices monetary policy would reach. So I don't have tons of confidence on that. I mean, I think the theory is probably right. As usual, time it takes to get all the way through the economy is just very uncertain. And we found that coming out of COVID, that the inflation did go away, and largely for the reasons we thought it would. 2 years longer than we thought, and so I think we are able for tariffs to go all the way through. And so what staff's been doing